Namaste. Welcome to the Hindu Parenting Podcast. In many of our episodes, we explore the question of identity. As Hindus, and especially Hindu parents, how we wear our identity is the key to how our children will see themselves. Many young Hindus start with misgivings, confusion, and questions, which finally end in understanding and admiration for Sanatana Dharma. We hope to spark the journey from confusion to understanding through discussions such as today's conversation with Rajesh Sengamedu, author of a new and delightful book of short stories titled Desi, Dharma or Dilemma. Rajesh is an Advaita Vedanta follower, writer, teacher, and sustainability professional who has authored 6 books on living a happy and contented life. Namaste, Rajeshji. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Namaste, Rekha ji. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk with you.
Wonderful. Let's briefly talk about the title itself first. Desi, Dharma or Dilemma. What inspired this name? And the subtitle, it says Beyond Movies, Music, Mufti and Masala. Could you just help us understand that first?
Absolutely. I think as I was researching this particular book, the toughest thing was to write the subtitle. It was not the title that was difficult for me. The subtitle was difficult. And the theme of this book was basically, try to bring out some dilemmas that the Hindu people face in their day-to-day life, and explain to everybody how people normally take decisions, what is the framework, what they use, and help them understand that there could be another framework called the dharmik framework. So that's the title, Desi, Dharma or Dilemma. But then as I started writing the stories, the different situations, researching and writing that, it started everything pointing it out to what we call it as in general as culture. Okay, and when I started looking at what is the perception of people in terms of how they define culture, it seems to me that everybody defines, or I would not say everybody, most of them define culture as a noun, like sort of customs or beliefs or art of any other type of manifestation of human achievements. And it could be a culture of a particular country, or and all those kind of things which are a noun. And nouns are best represented in 4 or 5 different areas. And movies, music are two things that everybody say, oh, it's Bollywood music, that's or Carnatic music, that's our culture. And similarly, food is a very good indicator of what quote unquote people think of culture today. And I sort of called it as masala. And then clothes, the type of clothes what people wear, although it is clothes is typically weather dependent, but over a period of time it become recognized as to what is Indian traditional clothes, a sari for a woman, or a dhoti or a kurta pajama for a North Indian. So that becomes recognized as culture. So you would see when Diwali programs happen here, people wear this quote unquote traditional cultural dresses. So sort of indicating the culture. But then I realized that that's not what culture actually is. Culture is actually a verb, and culture is something that is appropriate social behavior. That's fine, but it is to grow something internally. And a better word to express that is samskriti, which comes from the root kru, means which is to do, which is like a preparation to do something. So culture is actually a verb. So I just wanted to say that my entire book is all about stories expressing that the culture is beyond movies, music, mufti and masala, and the culture is to understand what dharma is to fulfill our fullest potential.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mention movies, music, and masala, because I always felt, as far as the diaspora is concerned, that the last things people lose, maybe, quite a few generations down, people still hold on to music and food I would say it's kind of hard to shake off your food habits. Uh,
Correct.
so this book focuses on first and second generation Indian Americans, Hindu Americans, right?
Right.
Uh, but I think it's more universally relevant today as far as Hindus are concerned, because many of these themes also play out in urban India today. As far as what you have seen is concerned, do you see any difference between, say, the second generation young Hindu growing up in America, or a young person who has come to, say, study and work straight out of India?
That's a very good question, Rekhaji. What I have seen is, um, when I used to live in India, I used to think that US was, from a quote unquote, the difference perspective, the difference that you're talking about, that US was probably maybe about 20, 30 years or 40 years ahead. And whatever trends that happen in the US 40 years later, or maybe 50 years later, they become a trend in India. But then with the internet, social media taking off, when I came recently to India, I noticed a huge change. And when I started talking with youngsters, I realized that probably India is on par when it comes to the younger crowd who's well connected electronically,
Mhm.
or either on par, or they are just a few months away. In fact, one of my nephews, she said that India is probably just 6 months away in terms of adopting what the US is doing, which I think, I don't think I believe it 100%, but I think you get a sense that, it's very close. And so the issues what people are facing in the diaspora, although I wrote it first for the diaspora, it was probably in a conversation with you that you probably mentioned that it could be even applicable for the Indian generation and in India. And I absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah, I was also struck by the fact that this is especially relevant for parents. Young
Correct.
parents, especially, we don't see, we cannot possibly look into the future when we are young parents with young children. So, some of these stories, in fact, all of them, bring out situations that could happen, say 10, 20 years down the line, when a young parent is not at all thinking of those situations. And the choices, the decisions that we make in those years before the child is, say, 10 years old or 15 years old, can have a far reaching consequence, say when they're 25, 30, 35. So I love that part of, I love the way you brought it out. So did you think about doing something like this consciously, or it just happened from your observation?
That's a great question. And what I was thinking was when I started writing this book, um, I was thinking that, I should probably highlight what the dilemmas are rather than tell what's the solution for the dilemmas. And then and as I started writing it, my idea changed, and the book started speaking to me. The story started speaking to me. The characters, they started coming alive. And when they started characters coming alive and telling me what they want me to write, then I started writing what the characters wanted me to write. And obviously it was based on certain reality, because I have seen certain situations in people. I have researched about those situations. So those situations started coming out. Of course, everything is anonymized. There's no identification of who the person is or what situation they were particularly facing in. So the whole idea was to put together something that would bring out the dilemmas and the conventional way of solving that particular dilemmas. And and then I wanted to also highlight what could be an alternate way of thinking about the same dilemmas, which is the dharmic framework. But then I realized that if I went ahead and said, okay, in this situation, the dharmic framework, if you put it, if you view it this way, quote unquote, the solution of the author, which is me, would be this, was like more prescriptive. Then I felt that that was not the right thing for me to do. Therefore, I left these stories as stories, inconclusive in most of the time. However, at the last few pages of the book, I wrote up a summary of what Hindu Dharma is, what Hindu Samskriti is, and and perhaps indicated, saying that okay, if someone were to understand those after spending some time and go back and revisit the stories, each one of them will probably have a different, uh, 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 let's say, diversion in the road what they could have taken than what they may have taken otherwise. So you're right. I just left them as stories, but with some framework at the end of the book for people to mull upon.
I think that's a very interesting approach because instead of making it prescriptive, you get people to think about it. And I think that's the point of a story, right? The way it ends has a lot to do with is it still going to linger in your mind? I wonder what this character did, and I wonder what the other character did. So I would say that's an effective way of getting people to think. It's also interesting that you managed to present the Hindu point of view on many of these Western debates like abortion, and why do we have children in the first place? Because that question I see on a lot of young people's minds these days. Why should we have children at all? And what is the purpose? The world is, there's global warming, there's all kinds of things, and we don't want to bring children into this world. That seems to be the trend. And there's a lot of nuance that you bring into these stories, and you also gave a good insight into a possible dharmic solution or framework, though it's not prescriptive. So how did you get this insight into dharma? Tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to have these kinds of insights in the first place.
I think my journey into spirituality started probably about 28 years or so, when we lost our first pregnancy as expecting parents, and something changed in me, and started understanding what exactly, you know how does one react to this kind of situations, how does one make sense of these situations. And from there I found my guru, I found my path, and understood a little bit about what our Hindu Dharma and Samskriti talk about as the ultimate goal, what are the intermediate goals, and all that. And along the path, I started realizing that, okay, there is a broader philosophy in which the entire culture of Hindus is based upon. And that philosophy is the philosophy of Ishvara, and Ishvara is the controller and ruler of this entire universe, including the people, each one of us inside that. And then, as you progress, it's a very difficult concept for people to understand, and therefore our scriptures present it in multiple ways. And as recent as about a year back, I started listening to lectures by Swami Tadatmananda in East Coast, who on Mahabharata. And he had a very interesting twist about how Vedanta is presented in Mahabharata. And when I started listening to his lectures, I realized that these stories, which are presented by Swamiji, are from Mahabharata with a dharmic twist, are actually a beautiful format to bring out the subtle nuances of dharma. And ultimately, if you look at Mahabharata, although it is a war between two sets of cousins over a piece of land. Okay, I'm just kind of generalizing it, making it, I'm sorry, trivializing it in some way, but it's just that. It's just that. But then, when you look at the underlying philosophy, the philosophy is ahimsa paramo dharma. But then, if you say ahimsa is the highest dharma, how did this entire Mahabharata war itself, which is the topic of the entire book itself, happen? And, why should someone write a book about war? Which means that there was something to explore, but at the same time to realize that ahimsa is the highest dharma as we start living in our life. living in a life. So then I started understanding that when, of course, there are going to be conflicts like the big Mahabharata conflicts. We will have a conflicts in our own life. But then when you start looking at it from a dharmic perspective, then if you start applying the lens of ahimsa as the parama, the foremost principle, then a new way of interpreting the situation will come up, which you can take a decision which is much beyond the conventional frameworks what we take a decision on. And that's how I started weaving in dharma into the various stories to present to people, saying that okay, this is the situation, here is the conflict, but if you view it from a dharmic perspective, there is another alternative.
Uh, I remember there's one story in your book called Five Pillars, 10 Commandments, and Dharma. I was
Yeah.
struck with the way you explained, I mean, or rather, you had a teacher explain Hinduism to kids, to non-Hindu kids also in a school setting. I thought that was a like a key takeaway for parents of children, because it really brings out beautifully the way in which you can explain dharma to a child who is not from a dharmic background also. And that must have really taken some doing, right? Thinking about it deeply and uh, wondering how to do it, and then formulating whatever you wanted to say through this school teacher. Would you say that being a parent helped you to do that? Being a father helped you to, write stories like this, especially on how to teach or at least bring up the topics of Sanatana Dharma, the concepts, to young people and to children especially.
I definitely think so, because and maybe you probably even found out my secret as well. I think some of the stories what I write uh, are are to help my children, if they read the story, to get certain insights. And I'm not saying all the stories are relevant for everybody, but at least a few stories will be relevant for few people. So when I write these stories, I keep my children in the background. My children are 25 and 23 now. But I also have friends and families, and colleagues who have children at different stages in their lives. And then I realized that, okay, if I were to write a story like this to this particular child, how would the child resonate? And then when I start putting that child as a subject, a person, somebody who's going to read my story, I wanted to present something that would be helpful for that kid to understand, or that kid's parent to understand. So here in this story, Five Pillars, 10 Commandments, and Dharma, what I was reflecting upon was, the teacher itself is from a Hindu origin, who surprisingly knows a lot more about the five pillars of Islam and the 10 commandments of Christianity. But when it comes to dharma, she's totally lost. And and for me, that kind of that kind of a plot helps people to think through, saying that, okay, first of all, if at all I want to know something about anything, I need to make a genuine attempt to understand that. And surface level reading and misinterpreting Sanskrit words and equating dharma as religion, then you'll get into a totally different impression, and you'll start making wrong comparisons. And religion and dharma are totally different. And nowhere in our Sanskrit says that dharma is religion. It just says dharma means dharayati iti dharma. That which protects all beings is dharma. And comparing it with the organized religion is absolutely incorrect. And I also recognize that there's another problem. The problem is, you know, um, unlike the Western world, Indian culture has been extremely poor at marketing our spiritual wealth. And there are great temples who depict all kinds of spiritual wealth in different forms. The spiritual wealth is depicted in stone, it's depicted in music, it's depicted in art forms and everything. But unfortunately, we are not very good at promoting it and explaining the philosophy behind it. So basically, I want to create that story where the teacher is, first of all, trying to learn herself so that she can properly categorize in her mind with a very she's a conscientious teacher who wants to teach the right thing. Therefore, she makes the right attempts to learn herself before teaching young kids. And then, fortunately for me, that character is also a teacher who wants to teach with the methodology that the students can understand. So she uses the question and answer method to imprint upon the young minds what dharma is and what ahimsa is as a parama dharma in that story of five pillars, 10 commandments, and dharma, which also distinguishes itself very, very nicely, saying that Hinduism is not comparable with other organized religions because we are not we are not a religion, we are a way of life.
So true. We are in this situation today where many of us need to re examine, relearn what we think or what we used to think is Hinduism. And so it makes the book relevant, not just for parents, but also for young people, because there are many stories that feature dialogues between young people who are on this journey together. They want to explore Sanatana Dharma, or, a chance encounter makes them realize that they want to do this together. And
Yes.
some stories like One Size Fits All and Cosmic Dance come to my mind here. So I like how you have brought young people together in their mid 20s, sometimes even in their 30s, to explore these concepts. So I think it makes the book worth reading for many young people too. And so there's value at various levels. So what made you use this idea, like having dialogues between young people? Because I think that also gives many of the stories staying power.
Actually, it was a pretty straightforward thing what I did there. What I did was I started looking at how people live their lives here, especially in the US. Um, it's work, and I'm talking about that particular category of people. Between, let's say, 20 22 to 35 kind of group who probably are single, or dating, or whatever, but they may or may not yet have any children as such, or maybe they have one child. So that's the kind of age group that when you look at that kind of age group, what they do is they work really, really hard, and financially, economically, very successful and hardworking. And then in the free time, they end up spending time either watching Netflix or YouTube, or spending time with friends, going to pubs, and and then with the when you start meeting a set of people and doing set of things like hiking together or going to pubs together, what happens is that one person rubs off on the other person, and then the bonding starts to happen, and then also the influence starts happening. And then I've also seen that when these kind of influences happen, some of these, sometimes what a particular friend says can trigger inquiry into a person, and maybe they'll end up researching about a particular subject and go probably deliver a patent, or maybe do well in managing a conflicting situation at work, or even probably picking the right stock in the stock market and make a lot of money. It can happen. So I use that as a let's say a frame, saying that, okay, hey, what if we have this kind of a conversational style between friends, or between two people, parent child, or a teacher and a child, those kind of very common situations between neighbors, to introduce the concept of a conflict within that situation, and how these two people would see. So it was very straightforward for me. Fortunately, I didn't have to do a lot of thinking on that, and also it was backed by thousands and thousands of years of storytelling coming from our Hindu scriptures. where almost every story, every Purana or Katha or story that you pick, it is actually somebody asking a question and somebody else answering it, and then the entire story is revealed. And there's stories within stories within stories, like Russian dolls. It's like that. And so it's a time tested mechanism that conversations and storytelling are the effective way of communicating a particular idea.
Yes, and I hope that your book and this podcast get people to talk about it and to ask questions, because you don't know where those questions will end. And when people start talking to one another about these things, when young Hindus, when parents, I think we need the whole community to start talking about, what it means to be a Hindu. Who are you? What is the essence of Hinduism? How are we different? So these are the things that we really need people to start thinking about, because I think once you know the truth, it's like once that hook is dangled in front of a person, then you become a committed Hindu because it's just so attractive and nothing else will appeal to you after that. So I hope that many young people reach that stage by reading your book and listening to the conversation that we are having today. One of my favorite stories in the book is I don't remember the name of the story, but it was about tennis lessons, about free tennis lessons in a church, and many young children going there. But the coach also takes that opportunity to preach, to proselytize, and it's happening in a church. So during the break, the children get to hear sermons, and the parents, some of them don't see anything wrong with it. And I think the protagonist, Lakshmi, I think her name is,
Yeah.
spoke to the coach about her misgivings. And then she finally gets the courage to pull her daughter out of the class because she may come away with a hatred for Hinduism. And I thought that was really powerful because it touches on the choices that parents have to make, and how difficult it is to do that, because not only this young mother had to approach the coach, she also had to face she had to face other parents sort of not agreeing with her, looking down at her. And maybe also, it's difficult to explain to the child why you're pulling them out of an activity that they're enjoying. So that is a powerful story. And I really like that one.
Thank you so much. And the title of the story was called "Tennis Lessons Anyone," and I have personally seen this happen in a church here, where I mean, it's exactly the same situation. There was a priest who was coaching the young kids and strategically taking a 15-minute break or 30-minute break in between, and quote unquote giving moral lectures. I have nothing against teaching kids the right things, moral lectures. But the issue that I would have is, if the parents don't realize that the kids are getting trained on psychologically on something that may or may not be in alignment with their own culture, their own tradition, then that's a problem. And fortunately for me, the protagonist Lakshmi, she realizes that there is no need to learn something new when her own culture, Hindu Dharma, has got so much of wealth to offer for right living in this life.
Mhm.
Of course, there'll be a lot of her friends and who will complain, saying that, oh, it's just teaching values are good everywhere. But the point is, many of these other schools of thought, they have extreme points of views. There is no negotiations in any point of view. So it's like a diktat. And unfortunately, for to follow a diktat means you'll have to violate dharma. And when I say you have to violate dharma, you'll end up doing himsa, which is the subtler point. And fortunately for me, in that story, Lakshmi understands what is dharma and what is himsa and ahimsa, and how that can be applied in real life, and why, you know, she's better off pulling off her kid from not being trained by something else that is probably not aligning with her own thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, I would say that for me, this story is probably the most important for young parents to focus on because this is a slippery slope. On the face
Correct.
of it, it's very easy to think, and as Hindus, we are trained to think in that, accepting way that says moral lessons are the same. So what does it matter? But this is actually a slippery slope, and very soon things spiral out of your control. It's almost like taking advantage of the goodness of Hindus to indoctrinate the children of Hindus into an ideology that finally turns around and tells you that Hinduism is, worships demons, and that the God that they worship is false. So it's a slippery slope. And this is going to be, I think, the most important, let's say, almost like the battleground that we are facing today. And this particular subtle point is necessary for Hindu parents to understand if they want to make sure they are going to raise a Hindu in the next generation and not somebody who is moving away from Dharma, because these things have to be, caught at different levels. And very often, when we live our daily lives, we don't really understand where things are going. And so I really thank you for writing the story. I love this.
Thank you, Rekha ji. Maybe if I could take a minute to kind of, tell a little bit about
Please go ahead.
something that I had not known this before. And uh, I grew up in a very small town, and I studied in English medium school, and it was a railway school. My father was a diesel driver, and what I realized was that the what we were learning was all about uh, as a youngster, we were all learning about some of the values that was coming in from a particular school of thought, Christian school of thought. And it was all taught in English, obviously, because it's English medium school. All the words, interpreting, everything was happening in English. And so what has happened was there was a complete generation of people, let's say people of my age, I'm 55 now, people of my group age, and maybe the younger generation, and even I would say my parent generation also, or
Mhm.
maybe half of the parent generation, um, they all have adopted, a different kind of a value system subconsciously without even knowing. So what we end up doing is we start propagating the same values to our children. And I'm not saying that all the things what we would propagate from a different value system are wrong. That's not what I'm trying to say. But propagating something without knowing what your original value system was. And when I say value, I don't mean ethical values. I mean dharmic system is a negative thing, because how can we say that, okay, without even understanding what your culture is, what your samskriti is, how can you discard it saying that it's all, not applicable in the current life, and whatever that you have learnt in school or in college time is the only right thing? How can it be possible? It's impossible. So that's the thing which I am hoping that people, at least in my age group, or younger age group than my age group, especially the kids, the younger generation who are, let's say, between 25 to 40 years, they realize that this is a problem and they need to fix this. Otherwise, two generations away, I think we will lose completely what Hindu culture is.
Absolutely. And as I keep saying, it is our right and our duty both to hold on to our children. Everybody does it. And we have such a beautiful system, and it would be a tragedy if we are not able to have our children glimpse this beautiful light. Uh, the other thing this touches on is right now, also, I see a lot of parents who are very surprised when their children turn against Hindu Dharma because
Correct.
we don't know that they don't understand the reasons. And I feel that stories like this will take them on a step by step, see, this is how it happens type of realization. And that's really important because we don't have the proselytizing urge or that gene. It's just missing in us. We are not told to do that. And I feel that's one of the reasons we are so poor at marketing. We are never thinking of how to bring anybody into Hindu Dharma, including our own children. And that is a big problem, isn't it? So,
Completely agree with you. When you say Hindu Dharma, if you look at it, different sampradayas that we have in the company, we have Vaishnava Sampradaya, Shakta Sampradaya, Ganapatya Sampradaya, then Shakta, then, different kinds of Sampradaya we have. And each of these Sampradayas itself, there are certain subsects and sub-subsects and all that. And the traditions, what each one of them follows, are totally different. And when you have so much of variety within the thing, it can cause two things. One is it can create confusion in the minds of the people. Say, oh, why is this done in this culture like this? In the other culture, why is it done not done and it's done some other way? And then people want to take the easy way out. Okay, tell me what I have to do, and then tell me what I have to do is a non-thinking way. You know, our Hinduism does not say you have to do this. Our Hinduism says these are the principles, and you got to apply your mind to the situation what you are in, and apply the principles and take the right decision. Now, especially living in the US, where quote unquote choice is abundant here,
right.
uh, I mean, choice in terms of where to eat or what course to take in college, everything is so, even in school levels, it's so abundant. I don't understand how you can discard a system like Sanatana Dharma that gives you the ultimate choice for you to apply the principles in every situation uniquely, rather than saying that give you here are the 10 commandments or here are the five principles and you must follow it. How can it be? How can it be discarded? Uh, with such disrespect. I sometimes it wonder. I wonder why.
Moving on, what suggestions or advice do you have for a Hindu parent today?
Uh, I think I should be talking to myself now.
You could be talking to all of us.
Yeah.
We're all in this together. So yes, forward to your
No,
insight.
I think the most important thing that I feel is, especially for Hindu parents now, delegating parenting responsibility to someone like a nanny is a sure no in my view.
Mhm.
And if that brings in challenges in terms of um, both the parents will have to balance their work and also bring up their children and all that, and especially in the in abroad, where you don't have a familial support and you will need to end up using nannies and creches and play schools and those kind of things. um, that is something that people should probably consider a little bit deeply, because they might not be thinking through what 20 years or 30 years later is going to turn out for them, in the hope that if they take care of the current today, it would current needs, maybe 30 years later things will turn out well. But I feel that that could be a wrong way of interpreting things. That's one thing that I would think that people might want to think about, and figure out a way of how they can involve the children's grandparents, that is their parents,
Mhm.
to actively help in bringing up the child. And that's one thing which I would think is very important. Then the other thing is, uh, there's a age group when the children mature from uh, physical dependence to getting into the emotional stage, the teenage stage is what we would say, right? At that time, that is a time when the kids are influenced a lot by their peers. And at that time, I read this somewhere and probably listened to one of the podcasts. At that time, the biggest enemy for the child during the teen is their parent, because at that point of time the parent can do only wrong, and that is a time they get very influenced. So the second important thing that I would say to the parents today is, don't look at these Sunday schools like Chinmaya Mission, Balavihar, or Arsha Vidya, where I teach personally, as something saying that okay, it's a side learning in addition to what the kid is going to do. I think they should also get involved in these associations and organizations, and not only help their children be planted with the right seeds in their mind, but also they themselves start understanding their own culture, because every situation for every person is going to be unique. And unless until they have certain principles and framework to guide their decisions, they will fall back on standard pattern of decision making, saying that, oh, in the past I did this, or my friend did this way in this situation, therefore I will do it this way. I don't think that is going to work. For which they need to coach themselves, train themselves on the fundamentals on which they can take certain decisions. And that fundamental is very simple. It is Sanatana Dharma's dharmic framework, which says ahimsa paramo dharma. That's the dharmic principles that needs to be applied. How it needs to be applied in every situation needs to be thought about and explored. And the third thing that I would say is that um, I also see that a lot of people have this inferiority complex, saying that, oh, I don't know a lot about my own culture and religion. What can I teach my child? Okay. And in any case, as long as they turn out to be a good person, it's fine. I think wishing is one thing. Actively cultivating how to make that wish happen is
Mhm.
another thing. And I feel that, they should take it as a challenging sport, saying that, oh, this is the goal, what we have. The goal is to help bring up a dharmic kid. And if it means that I have to change myself as a parent now, I will do it. And I think I've written a story also. I think it's called Cake Ya Ayush Homam, where the parents struggle whether to cut a cake or to do Ayush Homam ceremony for the child. And in the whole process, as the child is growing, the parents are also learning about their own culture. And I think I also wrote another story where where the parents don't know a lot, but then there is a kid who keeps asking questions to them, and then the parents are forced to learn something.
Fantastic. So, what you're saying is it's very important for parents to be humble enough in front of their kids and say, look, I don't know, but let's learn together. Point number one. This, the,
Absolutely.
the second um, is to incorporate the dharmic ways and the concepts they learn into day-to-day living rather than postpone it for once a week lessons in Balavihar. It's a dharma grows in your family with all the situations you face as a family on a day-to-day basis. And that's when you need frameworks like what you have explained towards the end of your book.
Correct.
Um, any pointers for young writers who want to write about the Hindu experience, whether outside or in India?
Um, okay. I think the first and foremost thing what I would say is they should write for themselves to clarify their own thoughts. If it finds an audience, it's great. And second thing is they should keep it simple. If it is a conflict, express the conflict. If it is an observation, express the observation. These days you have tools to help you improve the language or edit it out and make it succinct. All those kinds of tools are there, but what is the core idea that you want to express? And the younger writers also have another advantage because they consume content in short bursts. So I'm pretty sure that the younger writers, if they want to write a story or if they want to write a book or whatever, they can actually express it in 160 characters, the Twitter way. And once they do that, then they can elaborate upon that and then explain it. So if they observe something, if they want to communicate an idea, let them first write it in the short way and then expand upon it. And they should explore multiple formats, video, podcasts, uh, stories, novels, articles, talks, all kinds of formats that they should explore. The same thing can be put in different formats, or sometimes you should experiment only in a different particular format. And the other thing is they should not hesitate that, oh, I don't know how to write, I don't know what to write. because in Stephen King's words, he's written a very beautiful book called On Writing. The book title itself is called On Writing, and he says that if you know the basic grammar and some basic vocabulary, you have a toolbox ready. That's the top layer of your toolbox. You don't need to go into similes, metaphors if you don't understand them. You don't go into uh, subtle way of communicating a particular idea. If you can, if you just communicate it in the way that you want to communicate it. So I would say that these are the few things that I would say the young writers should think about, and without forgetting that whom they are writing it for. In the beginning, they should begin to write for themselves. And when I say themselves, the persona, the reader, is people like them, and people their friends. That's the extension maximum. I think that's where the circle of influence should start, and over a period of time, the repertoire of writing will grow, and then they will be able to help communicate their ideas better to a wider audience, and also help influence wider audience.
Wonderful. I'd like to add to that. So we can take it forward as we can think of it as content creation also. And these days, young people have so many avenues. Writing is one side, one end of it. The other side, of course, is something like filmmaking. I don't really want to say Instagram Reels, though it can't hurt because people seem to be consuming it so much that we need to have a sort of presence there also, unfortunately. But maybe for writers, writing is good. But for people who want to express their thoughts in some other way, perhaps any form of content creation would be great because we need all these dharmic young people, older people to pitch in and create an experience and an ecosystem and lots of stories and content out there that people can use to improve their understanding of dharma, to make them more dharmic, and to uh, keep these concepts in mind as they watch. Because right now, everything that we watch, especially all the content that young people consume, is pretty anti-dharmic, isn't it?
uh, I have seen the onslaught um, big time, and yes, you're right. And sometimes, there's also confusion in the minds of the people saying that, okay, what is dharmic? What is the anti-dharmic? They don't know that. They're not able to differentiate it because they're not grounded in a particular way of thinking that our Sanatana Dharma asks us to think, which is that to see the unity in diversity, and how to see the unity in diversity, and who that unity is, and despite the diversity what you have, if you're able to see the unity, why there would be issues, challenges, and even if there are such issues, how they can be solved. And so, when people miss that thing, definitely dharmic will look adharmic, adharmic will look like dharmic, and that's when their mind will become like a malleable substance that um, they'll be able to easily influenced by things that should not have happened to them.
That's a great point. People being unable to distinguish between what is dharmic, what is not dharmic. I think this really plagues us. And perhaps the solution to that is a good, solid grounding in childhood, which makes these kinds of explorations all the more important. It's been a very interesting conversation, Rajesh ji. Thank you for your time. We hope to catch up with you once again for another podcast.
Absolutely, Rekhaji. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm happy to come anytime to talk to the audience that you support. Hindu parenting is a great forum for us to spread this message, and hopefully, the parents will take notice and make some changes.
Thank you. Listeners, especially listeners from North America, please read Desi, Dharma or Dilemma, a new book of short stories by Rajesh Sengamedu, to understand what young Hindus may be facing and how to guide them. You will find the link to the book on our website, hinduparenting.org, in the podcast section. Please subscribe to our free newsletters to get all our podcasts and articles in your email inbox. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is Hindu Parenting. All our podcasts are also available on podcast platforms like Spotify, Google, and Apple. Many of them are on YouTube too. Until next time,